Hello YouTubers, Drynet Dave here. Thanks for joining me today. Just a quick video on this thing. Now this was a Coleman stove that I used to use years and years ago when I used to do a lot of night fishing, carp fishing, and it's a very good stove. It's the Coleman dual fuel 533. I used to run it with petrol, and very efficient at boiling water and just generally cooking anything up really. One of the reasons I stopped using it was because it started to sputter a little bit and the flame wasn't coming through so well and everything else, so I kind of put it away and went over to gas and sort of, you know, generally found other ways to cook stuff. So anyway, I rediscovered this, having a little bit of a tidy up in my garage the other day, and I thought I'd have a go at maybe giving it a clean up and service it and see if we can't get it up and running again. So this is going to be a little bit of a film to see how we do with that. So I've got together just a few basic tools which is the job. A bit of a wire brush there, a couple of screwdrivers because there's a couple of screws to be undone, long nose pliers because there are some fiddly bits you need to get into, and I've got these. You could use a spanner. There's just that there's a nut on the side of this thing that needs to be undone, which you can see there on the actual valve. That needs to come off. So I found it's just easy to use these rather than mess around with a spanner because it's something I've got to hand. But say very basic tools. The only thing I would advise is do make sure that if there is any petrol in it, you empty it out. It wouldn't hurt to have given it a bit of a clean, put some clean petrol in there, rinse, pour it out. I don't need to tell you, if you're working with petrol, be extremely careful, make sure no naked flames and so on. So let's get on with dismantling it and I'll show you how it's done. So one of the first things you're going to need to do, as I said, apart from making sure there's no petrol in it, is you've got a nut here that needs to be undone, and on the other side there's a gripping plate for the other end of this pipe that runs across. You've got a couple of screws in there that need to come out. So just to take care of those two. In case anybody was wondering, yes, I'm a lefty. Right, so this end isn't actually, although it looks like it's a nut there, it's not actually bolted in, it just sits in there loose, so you don't need to worry about undoing anything there. And let's come around to this side, just crack the tension off of that one, just loosen it up a little bit, so you can then come in there and just unscrew that with your fingers, and that should just ease up, just gently tease it past there. Now that's actually come out already on its own, so there's something I'll need to show you that later on if I can. Just make a note of this bit here that sticks up. When you open and close the valve, that bit goes up and down. I'm hoping that's focused. So if you just look there. Now there's a little hook bit inside this pipe that's on the end of a wire, and that needs to latch into that when we reassemble it, but I'll show you that bit when we get around to it. So basically what I've done there, I've taken that bit off. So this is actually one of the bits, you can buy replacements for these. If you pull this bit out, you can see there's a wire, a very fine wire in there. Basically that opens and closes or unblocks the nozzle in there. Now if your stove is damaged to the point where that wire has snapped or something like that, obviously you need to replace this part, but generally that will go in and out without any problem. This also allows fuel to run through, so it's worth checking that wire, make sure it's clean. If there's any indication that it's fouled or dirty or anything like that, it's an indication that this pipe's dirty, you're going to need to replace it. But on this one it seems to be okay, so I've not had to do that. So one of the things I did have to replace on this, because it was beyond salvage, was the pump bit. It's a pressurised stove, so what you're supposed to do is use this to pump up and pressurise it with air. Now when I went to do this, because it's been in here for so long, it hasn't been moved, when I went to do it, I found that I was getting no compression at all. So basically that was because this rubber seal on this pump handle had just dried out and it wasn't any good. So again, I bought this bit new just to repair that. You might have got away with just replacing the rubber bit on the end, but you know, I couldn't find a kit for that. You can only buy this whole piece. It was about £12 if I remember. So That's that bit. So the bit I'm interested in anyway is just making sure this is all clean up here. That bit comes off quite easily once you've done that. There's another screw in here that needs to come off, and I'll just take that out. Now as you can see, this is the bit where all the everything that gets spilled on here. So you've got all of these, you've got the top plate, and then you've got these fins that are form part of the, I don't know what you call it, a rose, I don't know. But if you look there, there's a intermittent crinkle smooth. So that just gives you the gaps that the fuel needs to come out once it's ignited to burn. So there's a little tray in there. So, again, there's not really a massive amount to be done to clean inside that. I think there's a drip tray there. But so there's all these, the bits I'm going to concentrate on is just making sure that these are all cleaned up, because there's a little bit of rust on them. I'll give that a little bit of a clean around. But the main thing is, as I said, make sure that this piece is all clean, that the wire's working good. You should be able to see a pin coming in and out of there. Just want to make sure that everything's clear, nothing's blocked. And should all be good to go. So this is the bowl into which the petrol is actually injected once it's been heated. I'll explain the mechanism on this at the end, but so there's not really much to do with this. I just wanted to make sure that it's not rusted, there's no holes anywhere. This is really a visual check to make sure that it's safe to use still. So most of this is stainless steel anyway, so there shouldn't really be any problems. But yeah, it's worthwhile just taking that off, just check the bottom of the bowl, make sure that there are no obvious signs of corrosion or holes or anything in there. So there we are, that's all of the rings all given just a quick rub down with a wire brush. You just need to make sure that if there's any traces of little bits of corrosion or rust or anything like that on there, then just make sure they've all been removed. So as you can see, you've got 4 crinkled, 3 smooth, so it is literally just a case of reassembling those. You should have a crinkled one top and bottom, so just reassemble like that, and that's your little stack done, ready to go back on. So literally that pops back on there, and then we put this one on top. Actually, I've forgotten a step there, guys. Did anyone spot a deliberate mistake? Get that on first, then put those in. And then your large screw goes through, locates somewhere in there, and just before you tighten up, just make sure that everything's all nicely lined up, straight, and then you can tighten down on the screw. And there you are. Again, before you fully tighten up, just make sure that everything's perfectly lined up along the edges, and you're good to go. Okay, so the diffuser's now set back on. You're going to need to put this thing on as well. Now, the thing you need to remember with this is that the pipe's going to run across that way. This bit, when it goes back on, it's going to run that way. So that needs to run through that slot there. So again, what you've got here basically is this is a valve, this bit here, that this wire here basically passes all the way through this. When you open the valve here, what it does is hooks onto this little bit on the end. It pushes and pulls the wire backwards and forwards, and that basically opens and closes or determines how much fuel is being passed through that little valve bit there, that little jet. So that all goes into here, into that bowl that I showed you earlier on, and basically that starts to drift up through the diffuser. When you light it, obviously you get your ignition. Now as the stove warms up, what happens is any of the fuel that's passing through this pipe that's running across the top here, that gets superheated. So by the time it arrives in that bowl at the bottom, it's pretty agitated. It's already quite close to its combustion point anyway. So that's really how these stoves work so well, and they really do blast out like a furnace. So very, very good for boiling water if you're doing that. I can't recommend them high enough as a boiling the bag option, because you get a water boil so quickly. So but anyway, I'll get this put back together again. I'll try and get a close up on the hooking in bit once that's ready to go, and give you a look on that. So the valve end of the pipe, it goes into there, and you just kind of got to tease the rest of the pipe on, make sure everything's in place. So you've got your end ready to line up on that bit on the valve, and that bit goes in there, and there will be a covering plate that goes over that, which we took off earlier on. I was on with a couple of screws to stop that going anywhere. So as I said before, with this bit here, and I don't know how well you're going to see this, there is a bit that comes out as part of the valve assembly, and the wire on the end of this bit needs to be attached to that. Now you just want the barest part of that hook poking out there, slip it in, close the valve to draw that down. As you do so, push that over, hold that in place, and then probably the trickiest bit is just getting this nut back across, and just finger tighten that so that can't fall off anywhere. As I said, just got to make sure that that valve is nicely located in there, and that your pipe is running through the vanes there on that pan support. So now I can put this back on, a couple of screws in there, and then we go on to do a bit of fueling, and do a little bit of a test to see if it it's working any better now than it used to. So I'll catch up with you guys in a second. Right, so this stove comes with a special funnel, which has got like a little bent black plastic pipe inside there, which I think you can see. The idea is that you insert this in that way, and what happens is you can fill and fill and fill. Eventually, when the fuel level is reached, basically this will stop allowing you to put fuel in, so you know that you've reached the limit. So I'm not going to put masses in here on this occasion, because I'm just doing the test. So I'm just going to put a tiny amount in there, just to give it enough time to burn off a little bit. Sure, I don't need to tell you guys, you're working with petrol, particularly if you're in an enclosed space, give the fumes time to clear before you might want to light anything or generate any naked flames. As you can see, I made a hell of a mess there, so I'm going to make sure that this is all dried up properly and cleared away, and that I've vented this room before I even try and light anything. So you don't want to go blowing yourself up. So I'll be back in a minute. Right, so the next stage in this process, it does have lighting instructions on the side of this thing, so but I've been at it for so long I don't even need to read those anymore. So this thing kind of twists up and locks. You're supposed to have it in that position when you're using it. I think it just makes sure that there's no vapours or anything coming back out this way. So, but in order to pressurise this, obviously make sure the lid's on nice and tight there. I've put a little bit of fuel in, so you unscrew this a couple of turns, and then usually it's 40 pumps. Right, so I've done that. Just going to close that valve off again, make sure that's all secured. Turn this around this way. Now my tip with anybody that's using one of these things, always have your light on before you open the valve, because that can just help. And there we go. So that's actually looking really good. That's what I remember it to be like. A nice frame there. Now you can hear it's just pulsing a little bit at the moment. That's probably because the fuel's moving. I haven't really pumped it up that much, so you've got supposed to give it a few more pumps after this. That's not the stove making that noise, by the way. I'm filming in my garage, which is next to a road, so unfortunately sound quality is something beyond my control. So that's not actually looking too bad. You can see it's really chucking out. Flame pattern's looking a little bit funny around there. We'll just see what it does, see how it settles down. But normally the warmer it gets and the hotter it gets, the better it starts to perform, because you're preheating that, superheating that fuel as it goes. So, but that's it. It does have its disadvantages if you're looking to travel light. It's a heavy piece of kit. Also, petrol, it can be dirty, contaminate, make your hands smell when you're filling up. It can obviously be a danger. You've got to be careful when you're using it. So particularly with people that are fishing, carp anglers not always happy to use these fuels. I was always a bit conscious about when you've got petrol in your hands, is that tainting your carp baits when you're carp fishing, that kind of stuff. I don't know, I'm not that bothered about it, to be honest, these days. I don't do a lot of carp fishing, so anyway, there it seems to be that the little clean-up job has done its purpose. This is now working again, and looks to be on full tilt. I'm quite looking forward to maybe taking it out with me on one of my future trips and using it to have a little bit of a brew up perhaps. Guys, just a little safety tip here. When you switch these stoves off, even though the valve is closed, that pan underneath does hold on to a little bit of fuel, so the flame carries on burning for a little while. Now, I usually like to depressurise these when I'm not using them, and it's always a good idea. Make sure that the flame is out and that it's had time to cool down before you undo this and just release that pressure, because you could get a nasty surprise if you're not careful. Alright, so just another little safety tip. And there was one other thing I forgot to mention during the reassembly. Don't forget to tighten this nut up and just give it a little bit of a graunch, because if you get anything leaking from out of there, again, that's going to cause you problems. Depressurized. Another good thing about this, usually you could put the stove back in the box while it's still hot, and just means that you can pack it away as long as it's flat and it's not rattling around in there. Means that you don't burn yourself on it if it's sitting around. So another good little tip.